Here's how narcissists manipulate your mind to make you believe you're crazy and lucky to have them. Have you ever found yourself in this situation, where someone tells you that you're crazy or too much and then, in the very next breath, assures you that they love you despite it? It's a subtle yet deeply insidious form of manipulation, one that is all too common in narcissistic relationships. When gaslighting is a constant presence, it doesn't just distort your perception of reality, it shakes the very foundation of your identity. Over time, this repeated manipulation leaves you questioning yourself, feeling unstable, and convinced that there is something deeply, inherently wrong with you. You might start to internalize their messaging, believing that you really are too sensitive, too reactive, too demanding, overly emotional, or simply too much to handle. But gaslighting isn't just about making you doubt your own memory or perception. It's about planting and nurturing the belief that you are fundamentally flawed. And if this pattern took root in childhood, the effects can be even more profound. When a child grows up constantly being told they are difficult, or selfish, or dramatic, those labels become woven into their self-perception. They learn to accept this distorted identity, not because it's true, but because doing so is the only way to maintain connection with the people who are supposed to love them. And here's where it becomes even more twisted. After repeatedly convincing you that you are broken, dysfunctional, or problematic, they turn around and say, "But I love you anyway." It's framed as an act of generosity, a magnanimous offering of acceptance despite your so-called flaws. And yet, the very flaws they claim to love were ones they likely fabricated or exaggerated in the first place. Over time, this conditional affection becomes the foundation of your self-worth. You start to believe that love isn't something you deserve, but something you must earn, and that earning it requires tolerating this cycle of invalidation and so-called redemption. This is how the trauma bond strengthens. The message you receive is, despite your chaos, I am still here for you. But lurking beneath those words is the unspoken implication. You should be grateful for my love, because no one else would tolerate you like I do. And once this belief takes hold, it can be incredibly difficult to break free. I've seen this dynamic unfold in romantic relationships, where one partner is told, "You're lucky I have a high tolerance for drama. I actually love how crazy you are." It happens within families too. "She's such a mess, but we love her anyway. Sure, she's frustrating and exhausting, but she needs us." It even surfaces in professional settings. Every team needs someone a little quirky to shake things up. Sure, they're a handful, but we put up with it. And in friendships, she's obsessive and neurotic, but hey, she keeps us organized on trips, so we love her anyway. But here's the truth. Those labels, chaotic, dramatic, weird, OCD, are often not reflections of who you truly are. They are projections, carefully placed and repeated until you internalize them. You accept them not because they resonate with your true self, but because doing so feels like the only way to preserve the relationship. And that's the real trap, because the moment you start believing their distorted version of you, they've succeeded in keeping you right where they want you. But then, they twist the narrative, making it seem as though they're doing you a favor by tolerating something about you, something that either isn't even true or is simply a reaction to their own behavior. It's a manipulative sleight of hand, one that forces you into a defensive position while positioning them as the benevolent, long-suffering hero. For example, maybe you've been labeled as OCD, not because you have an actual disorder, but because you're the one who always steps up to manage the countless details that an entitled or irresponsible friend consistently overlooks, details that, if ignored, would lead to unnecessary stress, missed deadlines, or outright disaster. Instead of recognizing your competence or the burden you carry, they reduce your effort to a quirk or flaw, subtly shifting blame while reinforcing their own lack of responsibility. The key to surviving these toxic relationships is refusing to accept the false narratives they impose on you. The human mind is incredibly suggestible. When you hear something over and over, especially from people close to you, it starts to feel true, even when it isn't. In narcissistic family systems, these labels serve a deeper function. They provide a way to define you within the family dynamic, ensuring that you serve a specific role. Maybe you're cast as the kooky, chaotic, or dramatic one. It's a role that, at least on the surface, gives you an identity. But that identity is fluid. It changes based on what the narcissistic individuals around you need in the moment. One day you're too needy, the next you're too independent. If you fail to recognize this manipulation for what it is, you risk buying into their story about who you are. But if you step back and refuse to let them define you, you have a real chance at seeing the truth. Their so-called love often comes with strings attached, disguised as affection, but laced with subtle invalidation. I love you even though you're so needy. I love how weird you are. I really love how OCD you are. While these statements may seem like compliments on the surface, they ultimately serve to reinforce a harmful underlying message. That you are inherently difficult, and they deserve credit for putting up with you. B, that you are not truly lovable, only tolerable under specific conditions. C, that the version of you they claim to love isn't even an authentic representation of who you actually are. Narcissistic relationships are where healthy love goes to die. This isn't just a case of misunderstanding or mismatched personalities. It's a complete distortion of what love is supposed to be. Real love isn't about tolerating someone or making them feel like a burden. So when someone repeatedly tells you that you are something that doesn't sit right with you, it's worth questioning. Where did this characterization come from? Is this who I really am, or is this a story they need me to believe? More often than not, these labels are fabrications, carefully crafted to keep you under their control. And if they claim to love you because of traits that aren't even true, I love you because you're so messy, so crazy, so needy, then what does that even mean? The entire foundation of the relationship is built on a lie, and once you see that, everything starts to unravel. Healing is about reclaiming your identity, about understanding yourself well enough that you no longer absorb these gaslit narratives as truth. But if you grew up in an environment where this kind of manipulation was constant, figuring out who you really are can feel like an overwhelming, almost impossible task, like reinventing the wheel from scratch. This becomes even more complicated when the things they accuse you of contain a grain of truth. For example, if they say, "You're so depressed and anxious, but I still love you anyway," and you do struggle with depression or anxiety, it places you in a vulnerable position. You might find yourself wondering, are they right? Am I lucky to have them put up with me? Maybe you are highly organized, or even have OCD tendencies, and you're actively working on it in therapy. Maybe you do experience anxiety or depression. But when someone frames their love as an act of charity, as though they are graciously tolerating you despite your struggles, it creates an imbalanced dynamic that keeps you constantly uneasy, always wondering whether you are one misstep away from being deemed unlovable. And when the realization finally hits that they claim to love you for something that isn't even true about you, the confusion only deepens. You start questioning everything. If you already felt disoriented in the relationship before, this realization makes it even worse. Because if they never truly saw you, if they never truly knew you, Then who, exactly, did they love?